Thanks to our California Ballot Forum sponsors, Bicker Castillo Fairbanks and Spitz Public Affairs, the Tribal Alliance of Sovereign Indian Nations, the Western States Petroleum Association, Physician Association of California, Perry Communications, Lucas Public Affairs, KP Public Affairs, Capital Advocacy, the Weideman Group, California Professional Firefighters, the No on 33 campaign, and the Yes on 34 campaign.
Well, thank you, Tim. If you were here for the previous panel, this will not be anywhere near as chippy as that. That is the plan anyway. I still encourage you to go out. I'm between these two, that's all I know. But I still encourage you to go out and find out anything you can about Props 33 and 34 before you make any decisions. So anyway, yes, I am Capital Weekly Editor-in-Chief Rich Ehisen. I'm really thrilled to be here between Rusty Hicks, who is the chairman of the California Democratic Party, and Assemblymember James Gallagher, who of course is a Republican, but again, we're not gonna have any brawls. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Like I said, this is not necessarily a debate, this is more of a conversation. So some of my questions will be more pertinent to Mr. Gallagher, some will be more pertinent to Mr. Hicks, some will be for both. So, and then please, be thinking of your questions now, because we are gonna save some time at the end for that. Anyway, let's start out with the most obvious thing. Most of us probably watched the debate last night. I think everybody's mind is on the election. Rusty, let me start with you. Which legislative and maybe congressional races are you watching most closely right now?
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you. Certainly, I would say that the future of the House of Representatives runs through California. New York might have a little something to say about that, but I think there's certainly plenty of opportunity here in California. I think there's a couple seats in the Central Valley to pay attention to. The seat with Adam Gray and Rudy Salas, a rematch of those seats from 2022. North Los Angeles, George Whiteside versus Mike Garcia is a seat to pay close attention to. And then in Palm Springs, Palm Desert, you've got Will Rollins versus Ken Calvert is another seat, certainly that we're hoping to pick up in this cycle. And then in Orange County, I think you've got as many as 3 seats, certainly holding on to the Porter seat. And then Young Kim and Michelle Steele, with our 2 candidates, the opportunity to pick those seats up as well. And so, you know, I think there's as many as 7 or 8 opportunities in California. There are some overlaps with some legislative seats. Certainly on the Assembly side, the opportunity to protect Assemblymembers Shivo and Soria to hold the seat that's being vacated by Assemblymember Manshine. And some opportunities to pick up a couple seats as well. In the Senate, Josh Newman, of course, will be a top-tier target. And the opportunity, a seat that overlaps with the Will Rollins-King Calvert matchup with Lisa Middleton. So there's no shortage of battleground regions in California for Democrats this year.
Absolutely. Well, Assemblymember Gallagher, I'll ask you the same question. What are the races you're paying the most attention to?
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the areas. Central Valley is going to be very interesting. You know, we got a rematch. Republicans, we did very well there last time. John Duarte, won that congressional. I really like what we're seeing there. I mean, Esmeralda Soria, incumbent, lost her primary, against the Republican challenger. So we think we're going to do very well in the Central Valley, and that's something we're very focused on. David Valadeo running for re-election there on the congressional side. Going down south, the desert, once again, I think will be a big fight. But I think the problem there is the Democrats have a cap. I mean, they've done a good job of turning out voters. I give them credit for that. Will Rollins, Christy Holstedge, Middleton. But they've got a cap and they have a problem with independent voters. And that's where I think that's been our sweet spot. We anticipate independent voters are going to show up in higher numbers in this presidential. And that's a really good thing for people like Greg Wallace, who's running for re-election. And I think has really established himself as, a bipartisan, pragmatic problem solver, in the legislature. So we think that's going to, bode very well, in the desert and some of those races. Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue, very strong candidate running for re-election there. So definitely a big focus for us. Orange County, is going to be a battleground again. I think the good news there is, hey, we don't have Katie Porter with, $17 million to spend. It's Dave Min, who's got a lot of problems. So I don't think we have to get into that too much. Against Scott Baugh, who was a very strong candidate, almost won last time in that congressional. I think Josh Newman's got problems. He doesn't represent most of that district, and he's running against Stephen Choi, who was mayor of Irvine. So I think that could be, that could be a possible pickup on the Republican side. Certainly, we'll be playing there as well. High Desert, Suzette Valladares, running for Senate. Lost by 500 votes last time in that assembly seat against Pilar Shaivo. But now this district is better registration-wise. And the other story is registration. Republicans have gained registration in every district in the state, but certainly we've done it there. That district's gotten even better for us, and we have a rock star candidate in Suzette Valladares. So, we think we're going to do well there. And then I'll end with San Diego, where I believe we will pick up the Mainshine seat. We've got a candidate there, Christy Bruce Lane, who almost beat Mainshine last time, 10-year Democratic incumbent. Well, he was a Republican at one time, right? But 10-year incumbent, she almost beat him, open seat this time, and I think in a very good position to win there as well. So, San Diego will certainly be one that we're going to be watching as well.
Assemblymember, I'll stay with you this time to start. I think it's fair to say a couple months ago, Mr. Hicks and your party were not feeling terribly great about some of these races, but we had a change at the top of the ticket, which I think we're all quite aware of. How has that change at the top of the Democratic ticket impacted some of these tight races from your perspective?
I'll say I think it does help Democrats to have a change. I think what we were seeing in some of the polling is people were not excited about Joe Biden. He was upside down in at least some of the polling that I was looking at, in many of these key battleground areas that we're talking about. Kamala Harris probably motivates the base more. I think that's probably true, and so that's a key thing I think on the Democratic side. We'll continue to monitor that and kind of see how that plays out. But I ultimately think, and we've said this from the beginning, that this, at least in California, the race is really going to be about cost of living. That's the number one issue. All the polling has shown that across the board. People are frustrated with their bills, electricity bill, gas, housing costs, and they don't see, the Democratic incumbents, the supermajority, doing much to help them on that front. And so we think, our candidates are laser focused on those issues. And I think ultimately voters, they're going to vote however they're going to vote on the national side of things, but I think here at home they're going to vote based on the kitchen table issues. And so, for us, we think that's a real opportunity for our Republican challenger candidates.
Rusty, I'll ask you the same question. The change on the top of the ticket certainly seemed to light a fire under the enthusiasm candle for Democrats. How do you see that change impacting some of these races?
Well, I think the debate last night was just the latest example of the clear contrast and the clear choice that voters would have before them on the November ballot, not just here in California, but across the country. And certainly, I think the vice president has run a near flawless race since her announcement, whether it was the announcement to the convention, and obviously, I suspect we'll get another bump out of last night's performance. I do think that in presidential races, down-ticket races get federalized in the sense that the energy that you have at the top of the ticket certainly drives what happens at the bottom of the ticket. In 2022, we really didn't have a top-of-the-ticket race in California because we had that top-of-the-ticket race in 2021 with the unsuccessful recall of Governor Newsom. And yet still, we came very close in a number of these congressional seats and legislative seats. And so I think my colleague here passed on many of the challenges of their own candidates that have not performed well to this point, either in Washington, D.C. or in Sacramento, have run, frankly, put forward subpar campaigns at this point. And at the same time, we're going to see dramatic increases in turnout as a result of excitement at the top of the ticket. It was mentioned about Republicans have continued to pick up registration in seats across the state. Well, this happens before every primary. Republicans always get a bump because they run a closed primary. Democrats give independents the opportunity to participate in our primary, so they always see a bump. And yet, if you want to look at the last 100,000 online registrations in California, 50% of them have been Democratic, 20% have been Republican. And amongst women, it's been 57% Democratic, 16% Republican. And so I think that gap makes it pretty clear as to what we're moving into as we get closer to the November ballot. We hit the former Biden-Harris campaign, and now the Harris-Walz campaign, is designed to win a close race. And certainly the California Democratic Party has been investing on the ground since the beginning of 2023 to ensure that we're in position to win a close race in November, and I think that's exactly what we're going to do.
Let me stick with the debate for just a moment, because it was noted that she didn't really note that her own California connection that much last night during the debate. How much does Kamala Harris's connections and her connection to California play maybe in some of the down ticket races that we've been talking about?
Well, I think she overperforms with younger voters. I think she overperforms with voters of color, both currently and the opportunity as they get to know more about her campaign, and her vision for the country. I think that will only grow. And so she's running for president of the United States, not the president of California. And certainly we are proud to be supporting a daughter of California, helping her get to the White House, but also ensuring that that she has a Democratic Congress and the gavel in the hands of the Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, to work with when she and Tim Walz get to the White House.
Assemblymember, I'll ask you the same question, because I presume you might see that not as a benefit, but as a detriment.
Well, there's two different things going on here. One is Kamala Harris is clearly running away from California. I mean, she is not talking about California. She used to be all in on banning fracking. We know that. Now she's telling everybody, no, I will never ban fracking. She's running away from radical policies like gun buybacks, which she was all for. I mean, I'm surprised I haven't heard more of an outcry from the progressive left in California. Like, where is our Kamala, right? She's running away from those issues because she knows they don't play nationally. They're a big liability, big political liability for her. So she's running away from California. Certainly, I think candidates will want to, Democratic candidates want to tie themselves to the national, presidential nominee. So, we'll certainly see people trying to do that. But I go back to, I think the number one question on Californians' minds right now is, how do I pay the bills? That's the number one question. And I think it's the candidates who speak to that issue of like, hey, what are you going to do to help me with my high cost of living? We're losing jobs, we're losing, people out of state. Net migration of young professionals, that was one of the most latest statistics. Like, that's not a good thing for California, and we've got to figure it out. And I just don't think that voters see the Democratic supermajority really getting answers, on those issues. I mean, look, we've gone through this whole legislative session, and where's the bill that actually lowers your utility bill? Is there one? It doesn't exist. Where's the bill that lowers your insurance costs or stabilizes the insurance market that's a huge crisis in California? It doesn't exist. Instead, we're gonna have a special session on refineries holding back a reserve, which not me, not Republicans, but Gavin Newsom's own Energy Commission is saying will cause shortages and spikes in prices. Like, that's what we're doing. I mean, it's totally tone deaf. Now look, I mean, it's good for me. I'm a Republican wanting to defeat Democrats in California in November, but the reality is, I think that we are more aligned with voters on the issues, and I think that's going to pay dividends for us. And look, I'll point back to 2020 when Trump was on the ballot. We picked up 3 congressional seats here in California. We picked up an assembly seat in 2020. So, Trump's going to be on the top of the ballot again, but and we know there's, he has trouble in California, but our candidates do well nonetheless, especially if they can speak to voters where they're at.
I'm going to follow up on the registration thing. We've talked a little bit about it, and you'll get a chance to reply on this. But as Rusty noted, there's maybe some technical aspects to the increase in Republican registration. What do you make of Republican registration? Maybe what's driving it, and really what's the takeaway from that bump?
I don't think he's wrong about the sense that, hey, people do tend to register more in the presidential primaries, want to be involved in the presidential primaries. However, I think this has been much more than we've ever seen before in terms of Republicans gaining registration. And look, it wasn't that long ago that, we had fallen below no party preference, right? Now we're clearly have gotten back above that, which is a good thing. But I think it's also like a lot of people in the middle. That's really where California is now. There's a lot of people in the middle who are like, hey, I don't really align with either party, and I'm looking for, people who are going to, cast the best vision for the future and what we can do to, help people where they're at in this state. So I think that gives us the opportunity. Yeah, our registration has always been much lower than the Democratic Party. But I think our voter threshold, you look at Central Valley seats. That's a perfect example. David Valadao has like a 16+ Democratic registration advantage. He wins. Why? He's winning over Democrats, especially Latino Democrats in the Central Valley who do not see a good path to opportunity by the supermajority Democrats in California. Inland Empire, we're seeing the same thing, where, high Democratic registration advantage, but our candidates are winning. They're obviously winning over independent voters, no party preference, and Democratic voters. And that's what matters, not what your registration is, but how you vote. And we think that we can take advantage of that come November.
Rusty, I'll essentially ask you a little bit of the same question, but looking at your party, I think people who are not as invested in all this as we are on a daily basis maybe look at parties as monoliths, but the Democratic Party in this state, supermajority, that it is not a monolith in any way. You guys have a fair amount of spread from the very progressive to more moderates, though admittedly there's not as many moderates in your party. How is all of that maybe playing into the party's singular objectives, and whether it's winning seats or whatever policy platforms you're trying to push?
Well, it just makes my job incredibly easy to be able to hold a big tent party together. My colleague talks about, voters are with us on the issues. Well, if that's the case, why do voters continue to reward Democrats with seat after seat after seat? And that's because they are out of step with where voters are in California. With regards to the registration conversation, yes. When turnout is 34% in Congressional District 22, David Valadao retains his seat by 3,100 votes. If that turnout gets to 45%, 47%, 50%, then Rudy Salas wins by 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 votes. So I don't think it's necessarily Republican candidates are winning Democratic voters. I think Democratic voters simply aren't turning up to the polls, certainly in primaries, certainly in low turnout elections, and that's where presidential elections can have a significant difference and make a significant difference, and especially when you've got significant energy at the top of the ticket. And that's where I think Vice President Kamala Harris running for president makes a significant difference in those kinds of races.
Sure. Now, we've also seen some defections from your party of late that are fairly high profile. I guess we could call it that. What do you make of that? I mean, now again, Gloria Romero's not in the legislature right now. Maria Alvarado-Gil has her problems of her own right now, but still, first time in 80 years.
I'm sorry, who?
Yes. First time in 80 years, though, someone switched parties at this time of year. So, I don't know, what do you make of this? Is this anything that you are concerned about or your party should be concerned about?
Well, my fellow chair will have to deal with their new member in the legislature. And certainly, it was a historically Republican-held seat that a Democrat was elected to. Political expediency decides to make a switch. With regards to the former state senator, we've been watching a slow and sad pursuit of political relevance for quite some time, and so I wish her the best of luck.
Assemblymember. Okay, so that was a loaded question. I almost feel bad about having asked that question. I did not mean to do that. That was not meant to be a setup. That was one of those things. I probably set myself up on that.
I'll just say, look, I think it's, without getting too much into this, it's just symbolic of what's going on, I think, among voters. Like, yes, Democrats have had the lion's share of the vote in California, but people have seen that's not really working out very well for me anymore, and I think you're starting to see it's not just elected officials, it's people who've been voting Democrat that are saying, I don't know that I want to keep doing that. And I'll just give one example of a poll that we just did in a district where 31% of people who said, I've never voted Republican, are considering voting Republican in this next cycle. And the reason is because Democrats are not getting things done for people, right? No one can look at the last 4 years, Gavin Newsom as governor, and say that things have gotten better here on homelessness, and they've gotten better here on crime. They certainly haven't gotten better on crime. We haven't even talked about Prop 36 yet. I think that's going to be a huge part of California elections come November. And on cost of living issues, it's demonstrably worse. Housing, this governor came in saying he was going to build all this housing, and he was going to be the housing governor. Man, we haven't even gotten close to the levels of housing we need to get built, and people are struggling to find affordable housing, in the state. So, look, they've got all the power, and you're right, you've had all the votes, recently, but what are you getting done that people go, man, I'm glad I'm voting for that Democratic supermajority? That's the problem that Democrats have going into November.
Well, okay, so that is true. And maybe you might be correct. There might be some Republican gains somewhere, especially down the Central Valley or whatever. But the reality is the Dems do have a supermajority, and the Republicans have not won a statewide race in a decade or more. And I think, while there are people who probably would agree with you that especially public safety and cost of living, those are issues that are probably resonating with a lot of voters right now. But some people would also argue that the party's official stance on things like abortion is dramatically out of touch with where Californians say they're at. There was an effort recently to try to get the party to move off of anti-abortion issues as part of the platform. That was not successful. What would it take for your party to maybe reconnect with some of those voters for whom that is a key issue that is almost more, that would supersede the cost of living and public safety issues? How do you connect with some of those voters that you just have not been able to connect with because of those hot button issues?
Well, look, I think that we have been connecting with voters, especially recently, and that's why you're seeing some of that growth. Now, there's no delusions. We are the minority party. But let me say something about that. It's always important to have a minority party and a voice of opposition and diversity of ideas. Those are important things, especially in a legislative process. And without getting too far in there, in the weeds, because maybe we'll talk about this later, but we're not getting that right now. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the legislature where ideas and speech have been suppressed. And whether that happens in Tennessee, where you have a Republican supermajority, or California, that's not a good thing. So it's good to have a strong and viable opposition party that's talking about these ideas and that's challenging the status quo. I think that's actually good. A more balanced, more of a balance between parties and legislatures and elected office, I think is a good thing. So we're trying to be that voice of opposition, and ultimately, yeah, we would like to be in the majority. But I think we're speaking from where a lot of people are at, in this state. When it comes to, issues like abortion, I think what you've seen in the Republican Party is a lot of people have different views on that. Yeah, we are a pro-life party. We have been. That's always been part of our platform. But I think there's a lot of people who say, hey, I make exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. I think there's a lot of people who have different views on when, what that, how many weeks should you, up into how many weeks should you allow an abortion. I think there's a lot of people who think it's very radical to allow for third trimester abortions, with no restrictions. And so that's, there's a lot of discussion on that issue. And I don't think anybody's monolithic, on the issue. And look, at the end of the day, California is a state that, constitutionally protects abortions, right? So that's not an issue that I think most people are really worried about on at least in California. But they are very much worried about hey, am I going to have enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month? What's going on in my school? Is my kid getting the education that he or she needs to be successful? These are things that I think are very much top of mind issues for California voters.
Rusty, I'll ask you a similar question, which is, people might have that same question for you in regard to things like public safety. We've seen some real issues around retail theft, what have you. We've mentioned Prop 36, which we're going to be talking about here in just a little bit. Same thing. How do you connect with those voters who say, look, I'm really tired of this, and I do want to have some changes around affordability or public safety, and you guys have been in power for a long time and things haven't changed?
Well, if we want to talk about crime and public safety, first, violent crime is as low as it's been since, cut in half since the mid-90s. Property crime and retail theft down significantly this year, especially in the Bay Area where there's been an intense focus there. You've seen the state legislature move forward with a whole package of bills to address retail theft, fentanyl-related crimes, mental health and drug treatment. And at the same time, you talk about sort of collaboration, being the loyal opposition. Well, being a loyal oppositional voice is one thing, but being collaborative on the issues that you say voters really care about is another thing. At the same time, Republicans have not been there to try to address some of these issues when given the opportunity to. In fact, my colleague voted no on specific measures that would have addressed, repeat offenders, would have addressed fentanyl-related crimes, would have addressed human trafficking, would have addressed mental health and drug treatment. AB 102, AB 120, SB 101, SB 104, all voted no. At the same time, go out and do a press conference and talk about Prop 36, which is really a return to the war on drugs, which communities of color were significantly impacted as a result of. You see the people that put up the money to put Prop 36 on the ballot no longer really putting money into it or standing behind it. You see the same folks who hated Prop 47 trying to take a whack at it once again. And so, our hope would be the opportunity to work together on some of these significant issues, recognizing that we do have a supermajority, but when given the opportunity to step forward and address some of these issues in a real way, Republicans have not done that.
Could I just briefly respond?
Okay, yeah, please. And then we're going to open up some questions.
The bipartisan retail theft package was bipartisan. Actually, Republicans and Democrats supported it. But the fact of the matter is that would not have happened without Republicans pushing for it. And in fact, the governor tried to kill those bills. He was trying to put poison pill amendments in there that said, hey, these bills actually would be rescinded. They would be, taken off of the books if Prop 36 passed. You couldn't imagine a more diabolical scheme. That's not showing support for retail theft. That's trying to undermine those efforts. And then let's not to mention that he's trying to take Prop 36 off the ballot. This radical proposition, by the way, Prop 36, that if you steal for a third time, you would actually do some jail time, right? That if you are a fentanyl dealer who's already killed someone by selling it on the street, that you could actually face a murder charge if you go out and do it again. That's called Alexandra's Law, supported by many parents who've had their kids killed by this poison, by the way, right? This radical notion that, maybe also we should tell people like, hey, maybe instead of going to jail, you could go into drug treatment and actually get treatment for the thing that is causing you to be criminal in the first place, drugs. That's supported by DAs and law enforcement and Democrats. London Breed in San Francisco, that crazy conservative, MAGA conservative.
I will say
it's very bipartisan to do something about crime, and Prop 36 and what was done in the legislature was very much part of that.
Okay, we have a whole panel coming upon this in just a minute, so let's keep our powder dry for just a moment. Questions? Do we have questions from the audience? I'm seeing hands coming up over here, Tim.
There we go. Hold on one second.
Assemblyman Gallagher, you just mentioned something about, a bipartisan bill. And actually there was another one too that I was covering, SB 1414, which was actually a bipartisan bill. Shannon Grove, Republican, Bakersfield. You see anything like that happening on down the road as well? And the reason why I bring that up, because it was a bipartisan bill, but there were some amendments to that bill. And we're talking about the, sex trafficking bill,
right.
Having violators having sex with children.
18-year-olds. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You think there, could be some more work down the road with her, because she got what she wanted, but she didn't get everything that she wanted out that bill, but it was a bipartisan bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that should just be bipartisan. So for those of you who don't know, last year Shannon Grove had a bill that said, hey, let's go after the pimps who are trafficking minors, right? So if you're a minor and you're being trafficked by somebody, let's make that into a serious felony, right? Now, some of you might go, why in the hell was that not a serious felony already? Well, it wasn't. And so all we were doing is saying that should be a serious felony. And it flew out of the Senate, bipartisan, and then went to the Public Safety Committee. We're on a party line vote. Reggie Jones Sawyer, chairman, and the committee killed that bill in committee. And they thought that was just going to be, because that's what they always do. Tough on crime bills, any kind of new penalties. They've killed bills for 10 years that I've been here. And they did it and nothing happened. Well, this time there was a huge national outcry and exposure. And that bill, the governor was embarrassed. And he came out and said, hey, well, actually, I'm going to call the chair and we're going to have a hearing on that bill. They did. It passed. It got out. Shouldn't have been that hard. Now, this year, she comes back and says, hey, but what about the Johns? What about people out there who are actually buying children, and they know they're buying children for sex? What about those people? Shouldn't they be facing some serious penalties and have real consequences for that? And so that's what the bill was about, 1414. Yes, very bipartisan. But we go to that Public Safety Committee and we get, but maybe this shouldn't apply to 18 and 17-year-olds. Let's just make it 16 and under. Well, I don't know, man. Last time I checked, if you're under 18, you're a minor. And I don't know why that should matter. And I don't know what kind of philosophy and politics thinks that shouldn't be the case, that if you're buying someone for sex, a minor, that somehow that shouldn't be, a penalty and increased penalties. I don't even understand it. I don't want to understand it, right? And that bill did pass ultimately, but it had those changes in it. And, these things should be bipartisan. And we should be, I think, very much opposing those who think that these are, who don't want to support such measures.
Rusty, do you have anything to weigh in on that? You don't have to, but...
No, I think it's a serious issue, and I think these types of important issues can be addressed in a bipartisan way. I think there's Democrats have a responsibility, I think, to have a healthy conversation, a robust conversation, and ultimately come forward with a final proposal that balances all the important issues related to that. It's easy to be the loyal opposition and just simply point out one particular amendment or the other. I would hope that there would be more opportunity to have bipartisan resolutions and solutions to these big issues that are on the minds of Californians. I know that Democrats are going to continue to address those issues on or with or without them.
There's another question over here, Tim.
Hi, thanks for this discussion. I'm, excuse me, I'm wondering about the close vote counts. We know we're going to have a number of contested contests in the Assembly, Senate, and for Congress, and we know in 2020 and 2022, the whole country was waiting on California's vote count, and we know that 90% of the ballots are going to be cast by mail, and it will take a long time to count. I'm with the California Voter Foundation. We've been studying this problem and looking for reforms, and one thing I've come to appreciate is that we not only have a long vote count, but we also have closer contests because we have more competition, because we have independent redistricting, term limits, and the top two, which leaves no wiggle room between the top two candidates. There's no spoiler anymore. So I'm worried about the election officials and the staff who are going to be counting these ballots and how hot it's going to get for them and their staff. And I wonder if you could talk about what your parties can do to keep things calm and make sure that our vote counts are secure and accurate.
Well, yeah, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, certainly California Democrats have bent over backwards over multiple cycles to make it easier to vote. And you can go down the laundry list of ways in which we've done that. Certainly the result is a painfully slow count. We certainly believe that every vote should be counted and have fought to make sure that that's the case. I do think that we all have a responsibility, especially to ensure that every vote is counted and the outcome of the election is honored, especially when you have a candidate running for president who has not committed to accepting the results of the election. And so whatever he decides to do, I think we're going to beat him handily in the popular vote. Certainly in battleground states around the country, that may be more of a challenge. But I do think my hope is that my Republican colleagues would work hard to ensure that there is a commitment to ensuring that every vote is counted, and that there is a commitment to honoring the results and outcome of the election.
Yeah, no, you raise a good issue, and I think it needs a lot more study, and we do need some, maybe some legislation, in the next cycle, trying to figure out how do we get that, how do we know that vote count faster, right? Because, waiting over a month, last cycle is crazy, we're over a month. What I remember is Riverside County, I don't know what's going on there, but man, there are updates, and all of a sudden you get maybe like 34 votes counted, and then like thousands of votes counted, and it never really made sense how that was going. Having some kind of uniform way of making sure that we're tallying. Every vote has to be counted 100%, but why are we in California waiting like over a month after the election before we actually know the results, when so many other states are doing this in a matter of like days to a week, have their vote? And maybe you have some, if you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear some of that insight. Like, is there a way that we could make ours more, efficient in terms of getting that count faster? Because it is an issue, and a lot of people are frustrated about it, that they don't know, this is going on months before they know the answer.
I don't see any other hand.
And I just have one last question. I think we're pretty much out of time, but I did have a question for each of you. Do you have a projection on what you expect to be the final turnout numbers, the percentage of turnout on the November election?
Wow.
High. I think it was significantly lower than we would have wanted to see in 2022. What we get to 63, 64 in the recall in 2021. I think you're looking at 2008 numbers. I don't know if we'll get there, but I think we should be in the ballpark of that.
Yeah, it'll be high turnout. I mean, it'd be hard to pinpoint what exactly that is, but it's definitely going to be high turnout election.
I assume you weren't asking me, so I'll go ahead and just say thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate you coming out today. I saw a couple other hands come up. I'll say the same thing I said last time. They still got to get out the door, so you have your shot to ask them something before they do. So thank all of you for being here for this panel. Thank Rusty Hicks and Assemblymember Jim Gallagher. Really appreciate you guys coming and sharing some time and insights with us. And we'll be back after at 1 o'clock with our third panel on Prop 36. Don't miss that one. All right.